While the running back class this year is horrendous, the wide receiver class is the strongest we've seen in quite some time. I started playing Dynasty in 2014, and that year you had Devontae Adams, Odell Beckham Jr., Mike Evans, Sammy Watkins, Brandon Cooks. You had so many talented guys. And this year, it kind of looks similar. And now this has translated to the most expensive wide receiver prices we have ever seen as rookies. Now I'm going to dive into what we have seen with rookie ADP at the wide receiver position every year since 2014 and show you why it's not as simple as just, okay, strong wide receiver class, draft as many of these guys as you possibly can. At the end of the video, we'll talk about what this means both from a redraft and a dynasty perspective. But right now, I want to be looking at redraft ADPs just to get a sense of what people are expecting from a rookie class this year versus what they've expected every year going back to 2014. We're going to be looking at underdog ADP. There have been hundreds of thousands of dollars already invested into these underdog drafts. So it's pretty accurate in terms of getting an overall sense of what the market's saying currently. Marvin Harrison Jr. going as the wide receiver 11. Going right behind Nico Collins, DJ Moore, right before Rashee Rice, Brandon Ayuk. Now, of course, Harrison is the best rookie wide receiver prospect that we have seen in a long time. Now, with that being said, this is also the most expensive rookie wide receiver we've ever seen. I'll talk about that a little bit later on. Malik Neighbors, also a bona fide stud, will be a top 10 NFL draft pick. Checks every single box you want to see. Actually, the #1 wide receiver in terms of his PFF grade this year. Going right behind Mike Evans, Jalen Waddle. Going directly before Devonta Smith, Keenan Allen. Malik Neighbors going as a low-end wide receiver 2, high-end wide receiver 3, which obviously is a much cheaper price tag than Marvin Harrison Jr. as a low-end wide receiver 1. Going over to our next guy, Rome Odunze, wide receiver 33, a phenomenal prospect in his own right. This is going to be another player that's a top 10 NFL draft pick. And this is the first time where we can say, okay, yeah, this is what you typically expect with a rookie wide receiver price tag. Typically, you are seeing that #1 player in the class get drafted as a mid to low end wide receiver 3 in redraft leagues. Now, I'd make the argument that typically those guys come at incredible values and I'm drafting the hell out of them, but we'll talk about that a little bit later on. Brian Thomas Jr., wide receiver 41, very reasonable price point, going after Godwin, Hopkins, right before Watson, Dobbs. You have Troy Franklin, wide receiver 49. Spectacular. I'll be drafting a lot of them. You have Keon Coleman, wide receiver 53. You have Adonai Mitchell, wide receiver 59. Ladd, Xavier, 62, 63. You have Jalen Polk, wide receiver 70. Roman Wilson, 72. Xavier Legette, 75. Devontae and Malachi, 79 and 80. So if you're looking at this wide receiver class, there are a ton of these rookies that are currently getting drafted. There are a couple guys that are going at crazy price points up as a wide receiver 1 and a wide receiver 2 immediately before we know their landing spots. So yeah, there's a lot to dive into here, but I want to just recap what we've had in years past on what we typically expect these rookies to cost. 23, yeah, JSN, wide receiver 40, Addison, 37, Quentin Johnston, 48. 2022, you had London, Olave, Sky Moore, George Pickens, Burks, Dotson, Garrett Wilson, all hovering between wide receiver 42, wide receiver 60. Devonta Smith was up at wide receiver 29 in 2021. You had Chase as a low end wide receiver 3. Keep in mind, people got really spooked with the drops right before the season. You had Waddle, 42, Elijah Moore, 50, Rondale, 61. In 2020, you had Lamb, wide receiver 38, as the most expensive guy. In 2019, you had DK Metcalf, the most expensive player, wide receiver 53. 2018, the most expensive guy was Calvin Ridley, wide receiver 47. Corey Davis, wide receiver 47. 2016, Sterling Shepard, wide receiver 37. Amari is the last time we've seen a wide receiver really crack inside the top 20 in terms of getting drafted in redraft leagues. You had Amari Cooper as the wide receiver 19. And in 2014, that phenomenal class, Brandon Cooks was the highest drafted guy in redraft leagues as the wide receiver 30. Now, I understand a lot of y'all aren't going to trust this data because it sounds like these wide receivers have been incredibly cheap for quite some time. And I can already hear saying, Mason, this doesn't seem right, blah, blah, blah. No, we got this data from Fantasy Data. This is the exact same place where we got the redraft ADP for the rookie running backs. And what we saw is, yes, the rookie running backs right now are cheaper than any year we've ever seen since 2014. And the rookie wide receivers are more expensive than any year we've ever seen since 2014. Now, this is not to say it's inaccurate. This is not to say, you know what, the market is crazy. No, it makes a lot of sense. This is an incredibly strong wide receiver class. This is a very weak running back class. Pull up the prospect rankings over on flockfantasy.com. You'll see I have like 8 wide receivers ranked before my first running back in Dynasty rookie drafts this year. And of course, if you're not already a member of the Flock, join flockfantasy.com. Code FLOCK, you're going to get 30% off any subscription. And if you use code FLOCK, yours truly will break down your Dynasty Fantasy Football team in a podcast when you join. You can check out all my Dynasty rankings, all the Dynasty rankings from all your favorite creators on YouTube. Plus, we have a ton of rookie draft guides over there. Plus, you have our Dynasty trade calculator, the whole 9 yards. Make sure you check that out. But nonetheless, if we are going back and looking at this, you can see there's a clear trend of people being more excited about redraft rookie wide receivers, which should be the case. If you look at historical data, drafting rookie wide receivers has been a profitable move both in Dynasty as well as redraft leagues pretty much over the past decade. If you're going out and taking those guys that, yes, may have a higher bust rate, but also may have a significantly higher ceiling, it's going to lead to a wider distribution of outcomes, and you're going to come away with more first-place teams. This is something that I always talk about. I never want to be the team stuck in the middle, just getting 6th place every year. I either want to be first or I want to be last. Give me the guy that has the low floor but the high ceiling. And you can kind of see an example of this. Say if you're looking at Romeo Doubs versus Brian Thomas Jr. Here, wide receiver 41, wide receiver 43. Romeo Doubs probably has a much higher floor based off the fact we've already seen him in his NFL career. We've already seen him find success, but you'd make the argument that maybe has a more cap ceiling comparison to the unknown of Brian Thomas Jr. Historically speaking, it has been a very profitable selection for you to go ahead and take that rookie wide receiver and chase the ceiling. Now, from a Dynasty fantasy football perspective, there are a couple different takeaways. One, there's no buying low on Marvin Harrison Jr. I am sorry. He is already being valued as a round 1 startup pick in both redraft as well as a super flex startups. If you look at the community rankings over on flockfantasy.com, which are completely free for you, but you will see that you currently have Marvin Harrison Jr. as about the 105 in one quarterback leagues and going right at the 1-2 turn in super flex drafts. Now, where you may get a little bit of value is actually with Rome Odunze. This is a wide receiver that has a phenomenal profile. This is a wide receiver that is going typically where we have seen wide receiver 1s in recent memory go, about that low end wide receiver 3 range in redraft leagues. But a big thing is if you are looking at his Dynasty price point, he isn't getting some massive premium like Marvin Harrison Jr. If you're looking at Rome, this is a wide receiver that in your super flex rookie drafts is going to be going at pick 6, is going to be going at pick 7. And a big thing that I want to point out is comparing him to some of these veterans. What I've heard a lot of people ask is, would you rather have Rome or Jackson Smith-Njigba? And I understand where you're coming from. I had JSN as the wide receiver 1 last year. And you're going to say, well, Mason, I mean, you had Metcalf, you had Lockett. What can you really expect from JSN as a rookie? He was the wide receiver 1 in last year's draft class. Maybe we should go ahead and take him over the wide receiver 3 in this draft class. My argument to that would be the expectations for Rome coming into this season from a redraft perspective are right in line with what you'd expect from the expectations of Jackson Smith-Njigba. With Rome, he is going to be a rookie, so whatever he does this year is going to dramatically impact his Dynasty value to more so an extent of JSN. If we go through the 2 hypothetical situations where both these guys are being drafted as wide receiver 3s in redraft leagues, if Rome comes out and he is the wide receiver 20 from a points per game perspective this season, Rome will be valued as a Dynasty wide receiver 1 next offseason. If JSN is coming out and being the wide receiver 20 from a points per game perspective this season, JSN will be valued as a wide receiver 2 next offseason in Dynasty. We know that you are going to get a massive premium when it comes to Dynasty value with the rookie wide receiver production in comparison to the year 2 production. Plus, if we use these redraft expectations, we can get a nice baseline of what projection should be realistically this next season. So if you are taking a shot on Rome, if you are taking a shot on Brian Thomas Jr., if you're taking a shot on Troy Franklin, these are wide receivers that in other draft classes would have potentially been up there as the wide receiver 1, the wide receiver 2, the wide receiver 3 of that class. However, in this class, where you have the studs at the very top, such as Marvin Harrison Jr. and Malik Neighbors, you are getting a decent discount on these options where it actually does make sense to go ahead, pull the trigger on them as wide receiver 3s and wide receiver 4 in redraft leagues, and then also in the later round 1 of your dynasty rookie drafts. Now, another thing that I do want to mention is if you are playing on Underdog right now, if you are getting in redraft leagues, what you are going to see, and you see it every single year, is as we get closer to the start of the season, this is going to be different in Dynasty, but at least in redraft, these rookie wide receivers will become cheaper. I know we can sit here and we can make an argument. You should be drafting rookie wide receivers all the time. These guys have great historical hit rates. These guys have crazy ceilings. And I would agree with that. I 100% do agree with that. But what we typically see is when people are sitting here in February, when people are sitting here in March, when people are sitting here in April, and we're all talking rookies, we all understand the upside. That's all we're talking about is the upside. However, once you get to August, once you get to early September, instead, what actually happens is people start to run projections with these offenses. People start to actually put out the median projections for whatever wide receiver room that you have. And you are going to see that 9 times out of 10, that rookie wide receiver projects to be significantly lower than where a ceiling is that we were talking about all offseason. So what we see a lot of times is we see these guys where they are more expensive now than they have ever been in the past. They actually get cheaper as we get closer to the season, and people have more realistic expectations on them from a redraft perspective. So when I am sitting here in the big board drafts on Underdog currently, I will take my shots on these rookie wide receivers that are going later on. These guys that may be complete bust, they may turn into nothing. I mean, hell, if we're looking at a wide receiver like Xavier Worthy, wide receiver 63, I'm not going to be the most surprised person ever if he's just Marvin Mims, and by the time we get to September, he's an 18th round pick, right? I mean, that is in the range of outcomes. But also, you could see him getting steamed up to about the wide receiver 45. There is some wiggle room in what you're going to see throughout the rest of the offseason. However, if you're going through and taking Marvin Harrison Jr., wide receiver 11, is there any wiggle room? He is already by far and away the most expensive wide receiver that we have ever seen. He goes to Arizona, does his price go up? Probably not. He goes to New England, does his price go down? Probably it does. So if I'm looking at this historical data, I want to come away with a couple different key takeaways. One, you should be betting on these rookie wide receivers in your dynasty leagues. From a redraft perspective, they're more expensive than they've ever been. If they come anything close to hitting from a redraft perspective in dynasty, these guys are going to be worth so damn much. Now, from a redraft perspective, I'm still going to be taking my selective shots on these later round rookie wide receivers in Underdog drafts currently in February. But when it comes to the guys at the very, very top of these redraft leagues, I think they're almost being priced towards their upside because that's what we like talking about in February. That's what we like talking about in March. It's natural. And I will hopefully be overweight on these rookie wide receivers from a redraft perspective as well. I just think that we are going to get better price points if you are drafting best ball teams when we get to August, when we get to September, to go heavy on the rookies there, where most likely the steam's gone off a bit and people are more so looking at median projections rather than just the raw upside that you would have with the rookies. But I think that should be it. Ladies and gentlemen, I really hope that we are able to help you out. I want to recap one more time. These are phenomenal rookie wide receivers. It makes sense why they're more expensive than they've ever been. Buy in Dynasty. Redraft, probably pump the brakes. In redraft, it probably makes a little more sense to invest into some of these rookie running backs when we've never seen them this cheap at all before. And then get your rookie wide receivers closer to the start of the season. I just want to make sure y'all know, I agree, this is a phenomenal wide receiver class, and in Dynasty, we should be buyers, and that's what this data illustrates. But I think that's all I have for you. Again, really do appreciate you. Really hope you have a great day. Really hope we get to see you out in a live stream sometime soon. And if you're not a member of the flock already, fix your life. Go get our access to our Dynasty trade calculator, all my Dynasty rankings, all the Dynasty rankings, premium content of all your favorite creators you watch on YouTube. Code FLOCK, you're going to get 30% off any subscription, plus promo code FLOCK. Yours truly will break down your Dynasty fantasy football team in a podcast. And on top of that, you will be getting a 1-week free trial. But I think that's all I got for you. Really do appreciate you. Really hope you have a great day. I'll see you in a live stream soon.